One wakes up in a palatial manner. Her day will be long but spent in relative comfort. Domestic work done carefully to keep her master's favor. Miles away, another wakes up in dirty barracks. His day will be brutal. He'll be pushed to the point where survival isn't guaranteed. Two lives, very different conditions. Both exist entirely at the mercy of one of the world's most powerful empires. This is a day in the life of a white slave in the Ottoman Empire. The raid came in the dead of night. The whole village was overrun in a matter of hours. Hundreds were killed. A few lucky ones escaped on horseback. But a much larger number was taken from the village in the Eastern European countryside to be dragged as cattle to their new home, the heart of the Ottoman Empire, Constantinople. This included two young lovers who were torn apart in the dead of night. As the raiders came, they tried to stay close, but they were soon headed for very different destinations. And the first stop was the market. The Ottoman Empire ran heavily on slavery, and it was regulated and sanctioned by the government. For hundreds of years, one of the centers of life in the city was the Esirhan, a massive slave market that was supervised and taxed by the government. This massive center of human chattel took in slaves from around the world. Those purchased from Africa, taken in military campaigns, abducted on the high seas, or rounded up in raids from the fringe territories of the empire. The young lovers from the Balkans briefly see each other as they're filtered out from the carriage wagons, but it's only a second before they're separated again, filtered into different groups for sale. Bron is herded into a large corral with hundreds of other men. It doesn't take long before an armored military commander walks in. He sizes up the men, examining them, and then begins pointing at them one by one. As soon as Bron is selected, his fate has been sealed. He will serve the Ottoman Empire as one of its soldiers enslaved to the military. And he can only wonder what his beloved's fate will be. Sonia waits. The women's quarters are far better than the men's, but that doesn't lessen the fear. The dozens of women surrounding her are sobbing and praying, begging for mercy. Soon the doors open and several men enter. They are well-dressed noblemen. They joke amongst themselves as they size up the women. Finally, one particular rotund man, dressed in fancy robes, crooks a finger at Sonia, and she's grabbed by the market hand and led to her new owner. Her fate is now in his hands. Once you're purchased in the Ottoman Empire, things move fast, and soon Bron and Sonia have arrived at their new places of work. For Bron, that takes him into the Sultan's orbit. The Ottoman Empire was the world's largest in the 17th century, and it was constantly seeking to expand. That meant the need for new soldiers, many of which were taken directly from the large numbers of slaves brought into the empire. This elite infantry unit, which served the Sultan directly, is known as the Janissaries. They were often taken as child slaves, given elite training, and became one of the most feared military units in the world. Bron is not one of them. For most conscripts in the Ottoman army, life is much harsher. Bron is starting on the lowest level of the military forces, and he endured brutal training to teach him the basics. Exhaustion is a constant companion, and he'll spend most of his time doing the tasks that the more valuable soldiers couldn't be bothered with, rowing the galleys, digging trenches, and preparing the battlefield, or whatever his commanding officers need him for. He, like many of his fellow men, is expendable, and that is his most important job duty. And every day brings risk of death. Bron wakes up in a moving caravan. He knows exactly what this means. Only weeks ago, he was a free man, and today he is not only a slave, but a slave who will be used to enslave others. He's been providing backup to the elite forces on a mission to capture more villages and capture innocent men and women to be taken back to the slave markets. Some may even wind up being conscripted by the commanders of this very unit, which means that Bron may wind up working alongside the very men he captures. But there is no refusing orders, something that Sonia is learning as well. On the surface, Sonia is far luckier than Bran. She's been enslaved to a rich, powerful man who keeps a large slave staff in his palatial manor. She's been chosen to be a domestic worker, her world now limited to the second floor of the house. Her responsibility is to keep several rooms clean, as well as to attend to the master's every need. She keeps her head down, tries to follow directions, but that doesn't always pass muster, as the older slaves frequently point out. Because this isn't just about service, it's about competition. The master is a very rich man, and he's amassed a large collection of female slaves over the years. Some of the older ones are essentially at the top of the pyramid, largely running the household in his absence, with the ability to direct and discipline the younger slaves. Others are much closer to him directly, serving as his harem after gaining his favor. And then at the bottom of the totem pole are those servants like Sonia, who are simply employed as domestic labor. She only has eyes for one man and just wants to keep her head down and do her work. But she may not have a choice. The master of the house is a very affectionate man. Sonia's already seen the treatment he gives all the young women in the house, and she does her best to ignore it. After all, he hasn't made any direct moves on her. If she was asked to join the harem, she wouldn't be able to refuse. It is considered part of her duties, but no young woman in his service is able to avoid his hands-on treatment for long. When his hand lingers on her back for a moment too long, she simply carries on with her duties as if it wasn't happening. Because as a slave in the Ottoman Empire, surviving the day is all that matters. For Bran, that will be much more difficult. The unit has been transported to the river, and the commanding officer gives his orders. The troops will be sailing down the river to a convenient point of attack against a village in the Caucasus region, a popular spot for invasions and enslavements for the Ottomans. The water route will allow them to arrive undetected, at which point the commanding forces will lead the invasion and take what and who they want from the village, just like what happened to Bran's village. And he'll be doing the lion's share of the work to get there. Bran and his fellow slaves are led to a series of boats, given control of the oars, and told to move as quickly as possible. It's grueling work, and it's the kind that's all the harder when the sun is beating down as it is today. Many men soon break under the effort, and they're reminded of the price of stopping or slowing down. A ruthless overseer, one of the military's higher-ranking slave enforcers, wastes no time cracking his whip. Just enough to cause serious pain, but not enough to injure the lagging slave. After all, their strength will be needed. The days rarely intersect for Bran and Sonia except when it comes time for prayer. The Ottoman Empire is a Muslim government, and religion is a key part every day. Muslims pray 5 times a day, and the day is often structured around those moments. The Muslim women of the house make sure the master has what he needs to do his prayers. The non-Muslim women who are enslaved to him generally stay out of the room during those rituals. It doesn't escape Sonia that the higher-ranking women in the household are Muslim, and some things cut across jobs. For Bran, prayer time is much more of an informal affair. His unit is often on the go, composed of heavily non-Muslim enslaved European men. The Ottoman Empire was one of the world's largest enslavers of Europeans, but the military commanders and many of the higher-ranking overseers are Muslim, so the campaign stops in its tracks to allow time for religious observation. The non-Muslim troops stand guard over their superiors, one of the rare moments where the higher-ranking soldiers are vulnerable. But there is another lesson to this observation. Conversion to Islam is not mandatory. In fact, it's a rather tricky topic for the slave owners. One of the key rules of the Ottoman Empire slave trade is that Muslims cannot enslave fellow Muslims. This doesn't mean that a conversion is a path out of bondage. That would be bad for business after all, and a conversion after enslavement isn't a free pass. However, it is still encouraged by the authorities, and most enslaved people who convert to Islam usually wind up with a higher status in their position. Something that might be very tempting after today. Soon the prayers are over, and Bran and his men disembark from their ships, mooring them safely, and they begin their march to the village. It's a long hike, with the sun beating down on them, and the enslaved men wear heavy packs with supplies. They're unarmed for now. The commanders don't want a rebellion on their hands, but soon they'll be distributed weapons and it'll be time to go to war. Sonia tries to focus on her work, but only as much as her master allows. There's no way to control when he'll decide to pay a visit and harass her again, and she works to be as inoffensive as possible without encouraging him. But there is no question, as the newest arrival at the manor, she has attracted his attention. And he's not the only one. His wife, the lady of the house, has been noticing her too. Her husband, a rich and powerful man, is allowed to have a harem under Ottoman law, and she has no power to stop him. But that doesn't mean that she can't take out her anger on someone else. Sonia hears the telltale sound of the lady's shoes coming into the room as she cleans the room. She crouches down, trying to look as serious as possible as she cleans, putting her back into the scrubbing, but it's no use. As soon as the older woman comes in, she immediately points out a spot that Sonia hasn't gotten to, and then Sonia feels the crack of a walking stick on her back. The lady knows how to punish the servants, especially the ones she suspects her husband might have his eye on, without it being visible to the naked eye. She doesn't react, and sure enough, she is soon gone back to her company downstairs. This household isn't just a house of slaves, it's a complex system. For domestic slaves, particularly women, they are governed by a series of Islamic laws, many of which provide certain protections to the women there. While men who own women as slaves are allowed to have sex with them, that doesn't apply to those owned by the man's wife. Sonia suspects that's why the master of the house ensures all of his slaves are owned solely by him. The lady of the house is older and has raised her own children, but her husband may not be done. When a child is born to a slave, they become a slave as well, unless the slave owner acknowledges the child as his own. From the glimpses that she's seen of the young boys around the house, Sonia suspects that has happened quite a few times here. And there is something in it for the women as well. While the mother of the child remains a slave during the master's lifetime, if she bore a child by him, she is freed upon his death. becoming an al-walad, a unique status for a concubine. The other slaves say the master is fairly generous to those he sets his eye on. Many of them hope to grow closer to him, to enter the inner levels of the harem, but Sonia still only dreams of Bran, despite not knowing where he is or if he's even still alive. And he is, but maybe not for long. This village was far more prepared than Bran's was when the Ottomans invaded. They are heavily armed with spears, waiting for the minute the Ottomans breach the perimeter. As the far more expendable unit, Bran's forces lead the attack. The phalanx isn't so much charging as moving as one, with Bran being pushed forward by the surge. His shield and sword offer almost no protection, and he barely notices the spear glance off his side. Adrenaline is doing all the work now, and now it's time for the cavalry. The elite forces ride in, their weapons at the ready. The village defenses are collapsing, and once it's clear they can't stand against the Ottoman Empire, few continue to resist. Bran has no choice but to watch in horror as the young, able men and women are captured by the commanders, destined for the same fate he and Sonia faced. He looks at his sword, wondering if he could take out enough of the elite troops on his own, but deep down he knows his sacrifice would be meaningless, because the Ottoman Empire doesn't just keep slaves, it runs on them. Slavery was a major industry in the Ottoman Empire. As many as 1.5 million slaves arrived before 1780, and guilds were formed to sort and trade them, dividing people by age, gender, skills, and race for the sale to the wealthy. White slaves were amongst the highest value, which is why Bran and Sonia both wound up in what was generally seen as ideal positions. Sonia's position comes with access to power and relative comfort, albeit with some horrific drawbacks. Meanwhile, Bran's role comes with a sense of pride and honor, at least according to the Ottoman military. Not that this is much comfort to him, as he bleeds all over the boat. Bran isn't in the worst of the wounded, but as he begins rowing again, the blood seeping from his side spreads across his bench in a steady line. That's enough to get the attention of the unit's medical team, which makes sure to clean the wound with a painful vinegar solution and then bandage the cut. He'll live to see another day, and it won't spare him from his duty tonight, as he's returned promptly to his seat as it comes time to begin rowing. It's a quieter night for Sonia, but no less tense. The sound of the grand party downstairs can be heard, with only the elite concubines invited to join the master's dinner festivities downstairs. For the rest of the servants, they eat upstairs, a humble meal of rice and stewed meat served from communal pots. Sonia can see the jealousy on the face of many of the women, but she's not concerned with the luxury downstairs. She's learning how to survive here, be effective enough to avoid excess attention and stay under the radar. One day, Bran will find his way out and they'll make their way back home. But there's no easy escape. Bran has heard all the rumors. There have been plenty of slaves who have fled from military service. Some wound up on the run while others were caught quickly. Most faced beatings when they were caught, but nothing more serious. After all, they were valuable property. But being an escaped slave is no easier. There's no way to earn a living, and the risk of being caught and sold into even a worse situation is constant. The Ottoman Empire is so vast that getting beyond its reach is nearly impossible. And so, for 2 of the millions of slaves in the Ottoman Empire, it is a lonely night apart and another hard day of labor the next morning. Want to know more about the history of bondage? Check out the horrible life of an average Roman Empire slave, or click on this video instead.